What a huge day for the Ample Isle. Congratulations to everybody involved. It's going to be a long road to that first bounce down in the new stadium down in Tasmania. There's going to be lots of bumps and bruises along the way. But if it gets there the way everyone's hoping, it'll just be something spectacular for our great game, Australian football. Welcome everybody again to Footy Classified. Matthew Lloyd, Damien Barrett and the Brownlow medalist Jimmy Bartell. Boys, can I just, watching that opener there, you can't help but feel your heart swell, can you?
No, it's genuinely euphoric day, isn't it? For so many people attached to the whole cause and the time it's taken and there's the joy that it gives so many people. But the challenge starts right now. I mean, as of tomorrow, this project has to be gotten right and it needs to begin right now.
Lloydie?
For me, like I've worked for a long time with Tim Lane and Matthew Richardson, so I see the passion for them. But I've also, one of the most influential people in my football career has been Robert Shaw. And he coached the Tasmanian side to that memorable game over the Victorians. So for us as a Victorian, I can't fully understand it, but I see the joy and the emotion and how it's come out of those guys today.
Jimmy, you've played for what we call a regional team in Geelong. You're on the board of Greater Western Sydney, development team, if you like. When you saw that today, how did you feel?
Yeah, pretty excited for everyone involved. And like Lloydie said, I work with Tim Lane and Matthew Richardson, as proud of Tasmanians as you'll get. And look, it's a really exciting time. Now, what Damo said, let's watch the build unfold. 5 years seems like a long time, but there's just so much to do. And I'm excited as a neutral just to see how they go about their business.
OK, so tonight on Footy Classified, we've seen the signatures today, we've heard the announcement, but now we want to get into the minutiae and see just what all this means, not only to Tasmania, but also to the other 18 clubs. Will there be a 20th club? That's down the track a little bit. What do you think of today, guys? First of all, we're going to roll some vision of it. I must admit, I was slightly underwhelmed by the marketing aspect of this. I really want this Tasmanian team to be the new Tasmania, to do to sport and tourism what Mona has done to art and tourism in Tasmania. And I just thought, first of all, I was a bit disappointed. Now, Richard Gord is the chair of Qantas and they've just announced their CEO, but I would have loved to have seen the AFL chairman there today and maybe even seen a little bit more of Andrew Dillon, who's going to have to put this, that's going to be his last work for the next 5 years. Great that Gillen was there, but I would have liked to have seen Andrew Dillon. I certainly would have liked to have seen the chair of the AFL there.
Yeah, well, it's going to be Andrew Dillon's project, isn't it? I mean, Gillen is there until October. I can understand why Gillen wanted to be there, given he ultimately stayed on till today. Part of the reason was
no problem with that, but I think
the presentation off.
Yeah, but I just thought standing out in the middle of a ground and things like that, there was a real opportunity to stamp yourself today. Some good graphics, even if it doesn't look like the stadium that's going to be built. Some schematics that better than just that one drawing we've had. I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more to think, right, this is a $2 billion plus, lifetime commitment of footy in Tasmania, and it just didn't quite.
I think there's so many loose ends with those still in play, Ed. And while it's been announced today, and while there's been a long build-up to it, and a conditioning of the entire community that was going to happen, I mean, Gil McLachlan even today hedged his bets somewhat when it came to the start time.
Clearly, there's a stadium to be designed and built, and there's other pieces to that. So there's give us a bit of flex, but that's certainly the plan and the proposition. Yeah, we've discussed. We think you could start a year before it was finished, but that's about all you could carry. We've had that experience before, but we'll work through that. It doesn't have to be, but you'd want to have a line of sight to when it was.
So that's a 2028 start date that he's referring to, but he nearly said the word flexibility. He got flex out, but look, this is the rough timeline, and that's all it can be said it is at the moment, because they don't have proper plans for the stadium, let alone the proper conditions around the composition of the playing list.
So they haven't designed the stadium yet, and yet we've got a budget for it now. I don't know if you've built a kennel at your house. Has it ever come in under budget, or variations is the theme word? This is going to 750. If it gets under 750, I'll go home.
Well, that was without a roof, wasn't it? So
well, I don't know. It's got the roof now, which is great.
Yeah.
So I spoke to an expert in Stadia last week before the show, and I said 1.5 billion gets you a stadium of that size with a roof. Doesn't matter if it's 20,000 or 100,000. You still got to put the roof on it.
I'm just huge on the fact that when this first team runs out, if it doesn't sound like it's going to happen, that they run out into this new stadium against a big Melbourne club like a Collingwood, Carlton, Essendon, and we look back on it and go, remember the time Tasmania ran out for the first time in this new state-of-the-art stadium, but not somewhere else. And also to keep these boys who would play in the first year or two, you want them running out into the state-of-the-art stadium, not into something for a year or two where we're just making do till we get to that point. So it's critical we
surely
start
the
right.
AFL have got over putting people in Nissan huts and caravans in the first couple of years of existence. This has got to come out and be like running onto Optus Stadium in Perth or Adelaide Oval or the MCG. It can't be second rate. I'd rather wait a year and get it right than run out and pretend.
We'll look at some of the specifics of the numbers that are attached to it in a few moments' time. But one thing the AFL needs to do quite urgently now that they've got the CEO bedded down in Andrew Dillon is appoint a football operations boss. And Ed, you've been saying this for a number of weeks, and I got hearing the same information that Brendan Gale has been spoken to, and there have been conversations around Brendan Gale to head up the entire football operations department in an old, maybe even Ian Collins style of way. Now, it wouldn't be as gung-ho as that, because that's not his nature, but someone who has got the full authority. And that man there, Peter Goodwin, the former Premier of Tasmania, may well be the best choice to make the first CEO of the football club, or at least a prominent role in the club itself to get it rolling.
And a good operator, knows footy, understands it. Was when it was the whips were cracking on this deal, he was the one who got it through.
He did.
He was right in.
He got angry when things went against him.
And he's been really good on these things. And he was open to understanding, or at least to accepting some other suggestions and go, right, OK, would prosecute it, but then would stamp himself. So he can stand up, because there's going to be pushback and all sorts of, you know what it's like in football, everyone's happy today. It's like buying a boat. You're happy when you buy it the day you buy it, and you're happy the next time when you sell it. But can I put you, Brendan Gale is the big one for me. A lot of people talking about him being the CEO of this team. No way. No. He has to be at headquarters making this work.
Tasmania is part of his portfolio, clearly, and a massive part of it. But I'm with you. It has to be the headquarters job.
And his mob have got to be part of it as well. The developing teams, if you like, there has to be a refocus on all this now. We can't let GWS and Gold Coast fall by the wayside.
I think one of the biggest mistakes Tasmania have made in a long time, the AFL have made, is they shoehorn people into trying to run football in Tasmania who've got no idea about Tasmania. So that's where it's just critical that somebody who knows Tasmania,
Peter Goodwin, for instance,
and Brendan has to be someone of that note, otherwise it just won't work.
Lordy, I think you're 100% on the money on that, just speaking to people in Tasmania, because there's still a lot of angst about the stadium. You know, hopefully they can actually explain to people, and I'm not being condescending, they come into different budgets. The housing budget, the medical budget, the education budget, they're different budgets. And you know what, from a political point of view, Anthony Albanese is not going to give all that to a Liberal state government, right? They got the AFL. AFL got this done with Tassie and the federal government because it was right on and the timing was right, because they're going to give 10 times that to Queensland for the Olympic Games. The other thing is a separate discussion, but the rank and file people at Tassie have got to galvanise behind this and turn it into one of the biggest community things, or people will get the stitch.
Jimmy,
so what happens, Jimmy?
How are they going to compile this list? You're the scientist on this list. You put lists together. You have in a past life. You do it now as a board member of a footy club. What needs to happen right now?
Yeah, so I get the fun bit to try and build them a team that runs out there. And remember, they've got to build a women's team as well. But the first thing for me is a mandatory full spend on the football department, and maybe a plus 10% allowance in your first 3 years. You need lots of bodies around there, development if you can have that influx of young players, good coaching, good strength and conditioning. As you said, Ed, no one coming out of portables in the first couple of years. A moratorium on all agreed concessions regarding draft zones, free agency, relocation allowances. We can't have everyone sit down in a room, really smart people, put whatever it's going to be, put to Tasmania for the rest of the competition regarding draft picks, who you can trade picks with, zone selections, kids from Tassie, with birth certificates. And then if Tassie are successful in 3 years, we water it down just because there's some vocal people from other clubs. And relocation allowance, you want to attract staff and good people, you've got to get their whole family down there. So if you sit that outside the TPP, you can get some good people down there, down to Hobart, Launceston, these places. And the last bit, even consider a Tasmanian birth certificate concession. So if you're approaching someone who's born in Tasmania, say the first year 20% of their salary sits outside. Each year after that, it comes back 5%. So we can have as many Tasmanians fill that side in the first 5 years.
Guys, I know that there's list management meetings happening every day this week now that it's official. I spoke to a number of list people today. The general consensus from the smart people in football is that they should be looking to finish somewhere between 6th and 10th in that first year. So that means Don't skimp it. Get them up and going as quickly as possible. And then at the same time, don't kill the bottom 8 teams, because that's what's hurt for 10 years in the past. So do you have a situation where you can only maybe take free agents off the top 8?
We can't have a situation, though, if they do really well early, that then we have some vocal clubs come out and go, we've got to take it back off them, because what ends up happening is we end up coming back to it and then we create a 10, 12-year problem. If it's strict 5 years, well, then every club can plan, Ed, around that 5 years, and they can be well and truly on their way.
It's going to seriously adversely affect the clubs that are down the bottom of the ladder, but not as adversely, Lordo, as the 17th and 18th clubs that came in. Now, in 2010, Gold Coast got the first 3 picks of the draft and 8 of the first 13. And the very following year for GWS, they got the very first 5 and 12 of the first 14. Now, it's not going to be that onerous. They'll be good picks, but they won't be in that lump form.
But they've got to get strong men into that team. They can't put kids in there.
Strong bodies you're talking about.
Strong bodies. They've got to be men, not young boys coming through. Let's hear from Gil McLaughlin what his thoughts are, and then, Lordy, I'll take your suggestions.
I think we've learned a lot about list build and list and how we do that to ensure, I think, probably more immediate success rather than longer term success. I think that we have tools in free agency and a lot. We've learned a lot about actually how you do that with limited impact on the rest of the competition. And I think there's an acknowledgement that now, teams, the patience is less in our competition, and the team will be able to have to compete more aggressively or on a week-to-week basis from year one.
Personally, Ed, for me, I don't see how you get both. So he's saying limit the damage on the other clubs. I just think if, we're used to probably Gold Coast and Giants winning 2 or 3 games in their first year. If we want to try and get them up to 6 to 10 on the ladder, well, it's going to be carnage, I reckon, for the other teams. That's where you're saying it's critical now what these list bosses do over the next 5 years to set themselves up to get through that period.
And I think maybe you have to have, and I'll go to your bit of judgment on this one, Jimmy, but if you get those bigger, stronger bodies who are maybe 26, 27, 28, who are there for a few years, who can carry you through, and you might get an overpriced pick in that. You might get a first-round pick off Tasmania, but they've got to use it on a player like that, but not stockpile 17, 18-year-olds who get killed for the first 5 years.
That's why it's important to the first couple of points I made. You've got to make it attractive. You've got to make it a good football department, a good setup for those guys who are 25, 26, because, like Lloydie's saying, they don't want to get belted, but they want to see, OK, where are we heading into the future?
And as you said, if you can actually make a bit of money on the back end of your career, take your family down, it makes sense. OK, over to you. To Damien, I want to find out who does actually own Tassie.
Well, we know it's going to have a unique structure, as unique as there's been in the AFL system. And while a government is for the people, it effectively, in the AFL structure, is a form of private ownership. Now, this is the money attached. We already know that money up the top there on that top line is for the stadium itself. And there's money attached to stadium buildings rent as well as the grant for the stadium. But on top of all that, there's another $200+ million going in over the first 12 years of operations. That $12 million is times 12 years. We've also got a $60 million for high performance centres. So it's fresh capital in that footy garnering sense that is different to most other clubs' operations. And another aspect of this, and this does get pointy-ended now for Hawthorn and North Melbourne. We know that those two clubs, and particularly Hawthorn, it's had an arrangement there with Tassie since 2001. It runs now until 2025, as North Melbourne's deal does. North Melbourne started in 2012. There's no certainty at all for those deals beyond the expiry of those current arrangements in 2025. And if I'm the Tasmanian government, and if I'm the Tasmanian people, you'd want it to go into the new project. That's not to talk down on the Hawks and Roos who've done some great promotional work in Tassie and clearly benefit financially themselves for doing it.
You're right though, Damo. They're not going to get that money. That's gone. That's going back.
Well, those figures are gone. Whether there's a tailoring between 26-7 before 28 comes in.
And North Melbourne, of course, their major sponsor is the Spirit of Tasmania. You'd think that's gone.
Well, again, whether it's... Look, it is a good relationship, and I know that company... It's a government body, though, Ed, as you say. It does like North Melbourne.
That's got to go to Tassie.
Well, you'd think it would, on the back of the government putting so much money into the actual...
So what we're saying is that North Melbourne, when this all finishes up, are going to be about 5 to the worst.
Yeah. Ed, you also forecast what's happened here a fair bit, including the need for a roof on this stadium.
Premier, you need to decide where your ground will be. That's your call. But it needs a roof. Simple as that. Yeah, there you go. Well, we said that a while back and we pointed out what needed to happen. And, I think it's been fantastic because there's a lot of pushback. The day after we did that story on Footy Classified, my phone blew up. Tasmanian people going off their heads, all the rest. And now there still are a few who don't like what's there. But as I said at the start of the show, we've got to change. This has got to look like Mona in Tasmania. It's got to be a whole new beginning. It can't look like 1950. I mean, I know we keep talking about the greats of Tasmania, but we don't play anyone who's in colour. We've got to actually get to 2050. We're closer to 2050 than 1950. So this is where it's got to be. And the AFL has got to look like it's the growth industry. And, you know, at the moment, it's great that we've got Tasmania. Please don't take me anything other than I love what's going on. But Peter V'landys is going to Las Vegas. And he's doing other things at the moment, and he's throwing bombs left, right and centre, and we've got to get your mob and Gold Coast and everything going. But let's finish that there, finish positively. Congratulations, Tassie. We'll get through all these things, but there has to be goodwill involved from everyone and a fair bit of positivity about it as well, but at the same time, not the cheerleading that seems to go on a lot in football these days.